Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar on understanding the role of school nurses and supporting school safety before, during, and after an emergency. We know that you've all worked diligently and tirelessly during this year and the past academic year to rise to the challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic has presented for our nation's education agencies. And we know that much of that work will continue into the next academic year as education agencies continually pivot and adjust plans in response to local, state, and national public health requirements. A sincere thank you for carving out time today to join us as we discuss this important topic. We want to share a few quick housekeeping notes and tips about interacting with this event. In the web links pod, the files pod on your screen, we have included a resource list for today's event that will provide access to many of the resources that we discussed today. We also have the Q&A pod, which is the mode that you can use to communicate with us directly during the event. If you have any questions that you'd like to pose to our presenters, we look forward to answering those during the Q&A session that will be designated towards the end of the event. And again, the Q&A pod is there for you to also send any messages to the facilitator. We also would love to hear any additional feedback that you have about the event. If you're not able for some reason to use the Q&A pod via email, you can send those questions to our help desk at info@remcacenter.org. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available in archived form on the REMCA Center website within a week following today's live event. I am so happy to introduce our presenters for today, including Madeline Sullivan, a Management and Program Analyst within the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools. I'm also joined by my colleague Allison Curtis, Director of Information and Product Management within the REMCA Center. And my name is Janelle Hughes. I serve as Project Director for the REMCA Center. We are so delighted to have our special guest today, Elizabeth Clark, MSN, RN, NCSN, and FNASN. She has more than 25 years of experience as a school nurse and in School Health Services Administration. She is currently employed by the National Association of School Nurses as a Nursing Education and Practice Specialist. Elizabeth is a former member of the Board of Directors for the National Association of School Nurses, a nationally certified school nurse, and a fellow of the National Academy of School Nurses. Elizabeth is also currently the project lead for the COVID-19 resource development within NASN, or the National Association of School Nurses. Again, we're so delighted to have Liz join us today to talk about this important event. I want to walk briefly through our webinar agenda. We will start with an introduction and overview of the importance of collaborative planning to support school emergency operations plans, or EOP, development. We'll also, through Liz, take a look at the role of school nurses in enhancing school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness. We'll also discuss how school nurses can be used to enhance EOP annexes, as well as overall school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness. And as we mentioned before, we will have a Q&A session, and we welcome you to, again, submit those questions at any time during the event. And we'll also spend a moment to share a few key resources to support your work around this topic. Before we get started with our presentation, we would like to conduct a quick poll to get a sense of whether you have heard of the REMCA Center before today's session. So you should see that poll question on your screen right now. Have you attended a live training, one of our virtual trainings? Perhaps you requested technical assistance or downloaded a resource, or you've met us at a national conference or in some other manner. And I see responses coming in, and it looks like many of you have attended our virtual trainings as well as downloaded resources, and we're always happy to hear that and to learn that those resources are of value to our practitioners. Again, we have included a resource list for today's webinar. It's available in the Files pod at the top right-hand side of your screen, and that will also be available on the archived version of our website once this webinar is completed. So thank you again so much for responding to that poll. We're happy to hear that many of you are old friends, as we like to call them, and we're so happy that you were able to join us today. Please remember that we are here for you. The U.S. Department of Education's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools administers the REMS TA Center to help build the preparedness capacity, including prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery of schools, school districts, institutions of higher education, and their community partners at the local, state, regional, and federal level. We are available via phone and email to respond to your direct requests for technical assistance on a variety of topics, from questions about registering or participating in today's webinar or scheduling a training event to topical inquiries about new issues in the field. Just remember again that we're always here for you, and we're so happy that many of you are joining us again to engage. We want to take a moment to conduct another poll to get a sense of who is joining us today and to get a sense of your role in supporting overall school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness. We know that many of you, based on your registration, are school nurses. We are also curious whether others are in a more response-based role, such as school emergency planners or emergency medical services and or other response roles, or if you're in a more general school-based role, administration, staff, educators. Awesome. I see responses coming in, and it looks like we really have a great mix, with the majority so far being school nurses. And so we're so happy to really share today, to hear from Liz. I also see we have others are state school readiness specialists, nurse consultants, risk management, lead nurses, paramedics. So thank you. These roles are all so important in the context of school safety planning as well as EOP development. And so again, we're really happy to have you all join us today. I am very pleased at this time to hand things over to my colleague Madeline Sullivan so that we can get started with today's discussion. Madeline, over to you.
Thank you, Janelle. Our nation's schools and school districts are entrusted to provide a safe and healthy learning environment for students, educators, and staff members. Faced with emergencies ranging from active shooter situations to fires, tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, and pandemics, this is no small task. Many of these emergencies occur with little to no warning. It's critical for all schools and school districts, public and private, large and small, rural and urban, to collaborate and plan ahead to help ensure the safety and general welfare of all members of their school community. The National Preparedness System represents an evolution in our nation's collective understanding of national preparedness and is based on lessons learned from terrorist attacks, natural disasters, emergency incidents, and other experiences. The National Preparedness System describes an organized, whole community approach. The system and its goal at the heart of this approach outlines how the whole community, including school communities, can prepare for all types of hazards and threats. The National Preparedness System highlights 5 mission areas: prevention, mitigation, protection, response, and recovery to help achieve elements of the goal. When planning, we use the paradigm before, during, and after, and we consider the actions we can take to help build capacity in each of the 5 mission areas. For example, we need to be ready to respond and recover in consideration of all 5 mission areas. In 2013, 6 federal agencies came together and created the Guide for Developing High-Quality School Emergency Operations Plans, informally known as the School Guide. It aligns with and builds upon years of emergency planning work by the federal government and was the first joint product of the U.S. Department of Education, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, and its Federal Emergency Management Agency, as well as the Department of Justice and its Federal Bureau of Investigation. The School Guide incorporates lessons learned from recent incidents and responds to the needs and concerns voiced by stakeholders following the shootings in Newtown, Oak Creek, and the tornadoes in Oklahoma. In 2019, ED's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools led the collaboration again, and the agencies created the role of districts in developing high-quality school emergency operations plans, a companion to the school guide, informally known as the district guide. The district guide serves as a complement to the school guide and provides information that can assist school districts in fulfilling both their individual and shared emergency management and preparedness planning activities in the development of comprehensive all-hazard school EOP. So together and individually, these documents put forth the key concepts, principles, and processes for continually building school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness, and protecting the whole school community before, during, and after possible emergencies. Schools and their community partners can use these guides to create new plans as well as to revise and update existing plans and align their emergency planning practices with those at the local, state, and national levels. You may access the at-a-glance versions of the guides or download the PDFs of both guides via the REMS TA Center website. The six-step planning process, which is featured in both the school guide and the district guide, is intended to be cyclical and ongoing. The planning team, identified as part of Step 1, can work through these 6 steps to create, implement, and continually enhance its school's EOP. Schools and districts can use this process to develop a plan, do a comprehensive review of their existing plan, and conduct reviews of their plan's component parts, such as an annex for improvement. These steps support a collaborative process, which invites multiple perspectives for information gathering, prioritizing, goal setting, execution of specific activities, and evaluation. So why collaborate? Because emergency management planning and the development of a school EOP requires a diverse set of expertise and cannot be done in isolation. It's critical that schools work with all staff within the school building with insight, including school nurses, as well as their district staff and community partners, local emergency management staff, first responders, public and mental health officials during the planning process. This collaborative approach will help create an effective school EOP that is supported at the district level and integrated with the district, community, regional, and state plans. This collaboration makes more resources available and helps to ensure the seamless integration of all responders. School safety is truly a shared responsibility. Schools and their community partners all have a role in protecting the school community. As school EOPs are developed and continually revised, the planning team can include partners from across the community, as well as education officials from the district and from within the school building, including administrators, school counselors, facilities managers, transportation managers, secretaries, school nutrition staff, and many others, all of whom have expertise contributing to school safety and can support aspects of prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery, including school nurses. Whether they're part of the core planning team or an ad hoc member, school nurses are invaluable to building safe schools and play a vital role in efforts to enhance school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness. That's why we are so happy to have our partners from the National Association of School Nurses, or NASN for short, collaborate in this webinar with us to help reinforce the role that school nurses specifically can play in developing high-quality school EOPs and helping to contribute to school safety programs, advocate for the needs, health, and well-being of all students, help identify possible students as victims of abuse and students in need of additional school-based support due to trauma, or adverse childhood experiences. Participate in or consult on district and building level emergency management teams, play a role in the incident command system, and support recovery efforts. With gratitude, I'd love to transition now to our partner, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for inviting NASN to share the important role of school nurses in emergency operation planning in schools. We are starting with some general information regarding the school nurse to provide some background information. This slide is a graphic representation of the key principles of school nursing practice. The professional school nursing practice is guided by this framework. NASN and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends students have daily access to, at a minimum, a full-time baccalaureate-prepared registered nurse. Unfortunately, there is not a school nurse currently in every school, all day, every day in the U.S. In 2019, a workforce study was conducted, and it showed that 40% of schools have a full-time school nurse every day. 35% of schools have a part-time nurse that is responsible for additional schools, usually 3 to 5 schools, and rotate from school to school during the week. 25% of schools do not have a school nurse. And I want to acknowledge that this reality may negatively impact a school nurse's ability to be present and participate in emergency operation planning development, implementation, and evaluation. The school nurse provides leadership and expertise in the provision of school health services. The role of the school nurse is complex and requires expertise in pediatric and community health nursing. School nursing is defined by NASN as a specialized practice of nursing, protecting and promoting student health, facilitating optimal development, and advancing academic success. School nurses, grounded in ethical and evidence-based practice, are the leaders who bridge healthcare and education, provide care coordination, advocate for quality student-centered care, and collaborate to design systems that allow individuals and communities to develop their full potential. The school nurse understands the impacts of physical and psychological trauma on student well-being, and they can provide health care and support in emergencies. In fact, school nurses have, in the past, emergency room, intensive care, and other acute care and community health care experiences prior to joining the practice of school nursing. NASN does have a position statement titled Emergency Preparedness. It can be located on the nasn.org website under Advocacy and Professional Practice Documents. This document provides additional resources for school nurses. It is essential that the school nurse or school nurse team participate in the planning process as a core team member and a school healthcare expert. School nurses, excuse me. School nurses use the nursing process, which includes their expertise in assessment, planning, implementation, and evaluation. These are valuable tools in planning and developing a school or school district EOP that addresses the 5 preparedness mission areas and the before, during, and after phases of emergency response in the school setting. As a school leader, the school nurse is an integral partner with school staff, including school and community leaders such as principals, school resource officers, and outside agencies in developing comprehensive school plans and procedures. In fact, school nurses make great emergency response team leads and co-team leads for schools and school districts due to their experience in healthcare and education as school nurses. We're going to focus on school safety and security and go into more depth on each of these areas in the next several slides. The first area to address is hazard mitigation. School nurses routinely provide health care to students with minor and serious, potentially life-threatening injuries and illnesses. They can identify patterns and trends in the causes of the injuries and illnesses and minimize hazards in the school environment and community at large based on their findings. For example, a school was provided a piece of playground equipment for student use on the playground. After several minor injuries and one serious injury, the playground equipment was removed due to the reporting of the findings by the school nurse. School nurses are frontline healthcare providers and are a valued member of the EOP team to develop, implement, and evaluate plans for communicable disease outbreaks, such as chickenpox, pertussis, H1N1, influenza, and COVID-19, just to name a few. School nurses frequently provide assessments on students that are experiencing depression or other mental health concerns. In completing a threat assessment, school nurses identify students at risk of harming themselves or others. The identification of students in these circumstances prevents potential violent incidents at school. Another example related to mitigation is one of poor air quality for students with respiratory compromise, such as students with asthma, which is the most common chronic disease in childhood. The school nurse plans for the limitation of outdoor activities before poor outdoor air incidents occur associated with wildfires with school administrators and parents. You can go to the www.airnow.gov to track and notify the school community of air quality each day. Many schools do use this program and display a colored flag on their schools and/or the district website. There are 5 flags. Green means good, red is unhealthy, and purple is very unhealthy. School nurses also identify suspected child abuse and neglect and follow mandated reporting regulations. The second area to address is facilitating evacuation. School nurses also facilitate the evacuation of students in accordance with state and local regulations, including students with special healthcare needs. School nurses assess and incorporate evacuation plans into the individualized care plans for students. This assessment may require specialized equipment, such as noise-reducing headphones for students with special sensory needs, or evacuation chairs for students needing mobility assistance in multi-level school buildings. The school nurse assists in the evacuation drills, protecting students from hazards within the school setting. The third area to address is triage. School nurses are experts in performing triage, defined in this instance as determining the order in which students need assistance, which is especially valuable in large-scale and mass casualty incidents. School nurses recognize and respond to identified needs, minimizing unnecessary delay in initiating an effective response. This improves the physical and psychological outcome for the incident and positively impacts those involved. Resources to practice triage skills for mass casualty events include BASIN's SET training, school emergency triage training, and FEMA also has a wonderful training called CERT, the Community Emergency Response Team training. You can check your state and local EMS agencies for trainings available in your area. The next area is health education. School nurses provide education and train staff in many areas, such as basic hygiene, such as hand washing, covering coughs and sneezes, universal infection prevention and control practices, emergency response and medication administration as regulated by states and territories, CPR, first aid, mental health first aid, stop the bleed, and also COVID-19 mitigation guidance. School nurses provide health education and training to individuals, school administrators, and emergency response teams. Confidentiality of protected health information is regulated under FERPA, and the need for staff to be informed in order to provide necessary emergency response in the school is key. FERPA's health and/or safety emergency provision allows for disclosures when the disclosure is necessary to protect the health and safety of the student or others. Surveillance is the final area to address for health and safety. Surveillance is defined according to the World Health Organization as the continuous, systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation of health-related data needed for the planning, implementation, and evaluation of public health practice. School nurses provide surveillance in many areas in addition to injuries, including communicable diseases, monitoring and mental health status of students that often frequent the health office. Concerns related to depression, anxiety, harm to themselves or others are often identified, and the school nurse can provide threat assessments and referrals to community supports. School nurses enhance the EOP development and provide a wealth of support before, during, and after an event as healthcare leaders in the school setting. The next few slides, I will highlight some of the ways that school nurses do this. Before a school emergency occurs, school nurses are the experts to provide emergency preparedness, training, and practice of emergency medical scenarios, which is critical in EOP development and implementation. For example, many school nurses create emergency response teams in schools and provide tabletop or simulated events. An example of a simulated event is using a CPR mannequin to simulate a school health emergency, giving the emergency response team the opportunity to practice and process prior to an actual event. This scenario can be based on the school nurse's knowledge of potential health emergencies for students based on specific student diagnoses. School nurses also create go-to emergency bags with needed equipment and supplies that can be quickly accessed and moved within the school environment. The bags may include emergency medications specific to students, such as asthma inhalers or epinephrine for severe allergies, and based on the student population, there may be variations on this. Equipment and supplies can be expensive. Community grants are available through hospitals, EMS services, medical societies, and other nonprofits. School nurses can actively seek grants and donations under school system policy for these needed items. As I mentioned earlier, school nurses are aware of students' special health care conditions, and this knowledge provides emergency operation planning refinement. For example, school nurses develop and implement plans of care for students with special health care needs, including emergency action plans. These plans require parents to supply 3 days' worth of life-saving medication for students with chronic diseases, such as diabetes and other diseases, in preparation of a large-scale event, such as a hurricane or blizzard. In planning for students with special health care needs, are there additional feeding supplies for students receiving tube feedings? Are there diapers and toileting supplies available for students needing this support being evacuated to an off-site location? What is needed for an extended lockdown or shelter-in-place situation? School nurses are essential during an event, implementing the plan and providing leadership and support in the administration of health care while responding to an event. The school nurse is the highest trained healthcare provider in schools to address physical needs and a member of the school team to address psychological needs. The school nurse has the experience, knowledge, and critical thinking skills to address and identify issues. So, for an example, during an emergency, the operations plan may recommend the school nurse have resources to create a triage center near the event, considering the safety of the scene, of course. Are the emergency supplies and medications current? Are they mobile? Are they accessible? Are there backup resources if the main resources cannot be accessed? These issues are addressed in the planning process to ensure that the school nurse has access to the equipment and supplies needed during the event. What are the plans for severe weather implications such as excessive heat or cold? During an event, it is essential to implement the plans for weather-related issues based on regional norms. The school nurse has the knowledge of the specific needs of the population that is served and implementing healthcare during an event. The creation of student-specific go bags for students with special healthcare needs is recommended for emergency evacuations and incidents. Go bags can include needed healthcare supplies such as diapers, wipes, suctioning equipment, diabetes supplies, etc. So after, school nurses enhance the EOP development after an event through participation in post-event debriefing and revision of the EOP plan. Recovery of the school community, including staff, students, and caregivers, is based on establishing a safe school environment. All events, from simple to complex, need reviewed and debriefed to determine what went as planned and what needs improvement. The expectations and roles of staff participating may need revision. School staff may need additional training and practice which can be provided by the school nurse. Students need recovery from physical and psychological injuries, and additional counseling support may be needed. School nurses can provide student support groups and partner with school mental health teams and teachers to monitor, refer, and counsel students. Schools certainly had a communicable disease section in their EOPs prior to the 2019-2020 school year. This plan was detailed, revised, and revised again due to the change in guidance from CDC and other health leaders as research was released. I would venture to say that schools developed a comprehensive plan, including their school nurse leaders, that will prepare them for the next pandemic on the horizon. And now I'm going to have Janelle take over.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Such valuable information shared. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm hoping that our participants did as well. I do want to take a moment to apologize for the technical audio issues that anyone experienced earlier during the event. We sincerely appreciate you sticking on for this webinar. I do want to take a moment to respond to Elizabeth just stated. As you described, Elizabeth, schools across the nation, in collaboration with their school nurses and other key planning partners, work to update EOPs in response to the pandemic based on lessons learned, state and local mandates, and efforts to be more prepared for pandemic planning and response, but also the dual impacts of the pandemic and other threats and hazards happening simultaneously. The district and the school guides that Madeline shared earlier present a traditional format that can be tailored to meet individual school needs as those schools work to develop and revise EOPs. It is not a required format. It is just one possible format and includes three major sections. The basic plan section of the school EOP provides an overview of the school's approach to emergency operations. The functional annexes section details the goals, objectives, and courses of action of essential functions, such as evacuation, which Elizabeth spoke about earlier, lockdown, communications and warning, accounting for all students, all of those functions that apply across multiple threats and hazards. And then the threat and hazard-specific annexes section specifies those goals, objectives, and courses of action that a school will follow before, during, and after a particular type of threat or hazard, such as a hurricane, fire, cybersecurity event, or the pandemic. Both sets of annexes are really akin to appendices. These annexes are additional parts that help explain further, or more specifically, concepts within that basic plan. Again, functional annexes focus on those common critical operational functions used during emergencies and the courses of action used to carry them out and achieve the goals and objectives. So you see some of those sample operational functions on the left-hand side of the screen. While these are some of the most important functions, they are not meant to constitute an exhaustive list. This is just a set of sample functions that are common across numerous threats and hazards. As the planning team assesses the school's needs, it may determine to prepare additional or different annexes. The REMCA Center has created several sample functional annexes that may be found on our publications page if you would like to see how some could be constructed. These were created for fictional schools on family reunification, lockdown, and shelter in place. Schools will also develop threat and hazard-specific annexes, again, based on that prioritized list of threats and hazards determined in the assessment process. As planning teams develop courses of action for those threats and hazards, they should consider the federal, state, and local regulations or mandates that often apply to specific hazards. Talking for a moment about particular types of annexes, school nurses likely have insight to share that can enhance planning around the before, during, and after phases of a variety of threat and hazard types. The same applies to functional annexes, which we've just reviewed on the previous slide. The public health, medical, and mental health annex, for example, was just one functional annex type that a school nurse could help inform, and it is the one that will likely come to the minds of many when first brainstorming that role that school nurses can play in supporting EOP development. This annex plans the courses of action that the school will implement to address emergency medical, public health, and mental health counseling issues, for example, and as schools coordinate these efforts with community partners, including appropriate EMS, public health, mental health, law enforcement, fire department, and emergency management representatives, School nurses truly have a wealth of expertise and leadership skills serving the team, as Elizabeth just shared with us. The most comprehensive and effective school EOP is developed by a multidisciplinary team. In step 1 of the 6-step planning process outlined in the Guide for Developing High-Quality School EOPs, schools identify a core planning team that will collaborate to analyze and prioritize the threats and hazards facing the school and use its collective expertise to inform the development, implementation, and refinement of the school EOP. That multidisciplinary team approach adds value to the breadth, depth, and scope of the plan. It also helps to ensure that all aspects of safety and security are considered from multiple professional perspectives. It also, of course, allows for greater input and expertise and provides access to those federal, state, and local data points about historical threats and hazards and trends, as well as access to local community partner data and that rapport with local organizations, such as the American Red Cross or those CERT teams, as Liz just described. Each member of the core planning team is not only a steward from his or her specific group, but also carries that safety and training messages from the core planning team back to his or her constituent group. School nurses, as a part of that team, can support the use of clear and well-understood lines of communication between stakeholders. And of course, during the response phase of an emergency, nurses can play a role in communicating with community responders as a part of the planning process and in preparation for a potential emergency. Those partners might include ambulance and medical services partners, law enforcement, fire personnel, and or mental health practitioners. Who is on the team is of utmost importance because these individuals will have the significant role in step 2, during which schools are working to understand the situation. Or, in other words, these persons will uniquely identify what are those hazards and threats in the school community and subsequently help prioritize and address the issues that the school faces as a result. For example, in understanding the medical impacts of the variety of threats and hazards the school may face, school nurses play a key role. It is important that school and school nurses have documentation and are aware of existing chronic illnesses, for example, that incoming or existing students may have or develop. This information would, of course, be collected through medical history forms, as well as a routine physical exam when a student is admitted into the school. Having this information is critical for school nurses to create that treatment plan when necessary, as well as for preparing the case of a medical emergency related to an existing medical condition. As Elizabeth described during the slide on hazard mitigation, along with routinely providing health care to students with minor and seriously potentially life-threatening injuries and illness, information that will be collected via those forms and when providing care, school nurses also conduct assessments on students experiencing mental health concerns and can offer expertise and strategies around mitigation of poor air quality in schools and classrooms. So again, those are just some examples of the role that the school nurse can play. Among other areas of expertise, they can also help identify patterns and trends in the causes of injuries and illness and minimize a variety of threats and hazards in the school environment based on their findings as a goal. All of these skills support school safety planning teams in understanding the situation as a part of step 2. And I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Allison so that we can continue this discussion on the 6-step planning process. Allison?
Thanks, Janelle. Let's talk a moment about threats and hazards. In the context of school safety planning, they are referenced into 4 categories: natural hazards, technological hazards, biological hazards, and adversarial, incidental, and human-caused threats. Sample threats and hazards are listed according to those categories on your screen, but this is by no means an exhaustive list. The difference between hazards and threats is that a threat includes an adversary. It is a planning team's responsibility to develop a priority list of which threats and hazards are most important to plan for based on an assessment process. As discussed in the previous slide, school nurses can help identify patterns and trends in the causes of the injuries and illness, minimize a variety of threats, and help mitigate the effects of hazards in the school environment based on their findings from assessments and engagement with students. Looking at this sample list of hazards and threats, it is hard to imagine that one would not require the involvement and expertise of a school nurse, whether to support prevention, protection, mitigation, response, or recovery. Assessments help the planning team to customize the EOP, and there are numerous assessments that the planning team may use, including the 4 that are located on your screen. The first is site assessment, and this assessment includes, but is not limited to, a review of building access control measures, visibility around the exterior of the buildings, compliance with applicable architectural standards for individuals with disabilities and others with access and functional needs, structural integrity of the buildings, and emergency vehicle access. This assessment may also include a review of air quality in the school building, for which the school nurse can offer critical support and expertise, as Elizabeth described. The REMS TA Center has a free mobile application, Site Assess, which is available for conducting site assessments. The second is climate assessment. In a nurturing, inclusive environment, members of a school community are more likely to succeed, feel safe, and report threats. If a student survey is used to assess culture and climate, student privacy must be protected. A range of personnel in the school can assist in the assessment of climate, including, of course, school nurses, who may help inform the development of questions featured in the climate assessment based on lessons learned from experiences interacting with students and families. Behavioral threat assessment is another type where a multidisciplinary team assesses the behaviors and communications of school community members to determine whether any individuals pose a threat to themselves or others. It should align with all applicable laws and guidelines around privacy and civil rights. And the threat assessment team is distinct from the core planning team, although the presence of a threat assessment team may be included in the EOP. Again, Elizabeth highlighted the role of the school nurse in conducting assessments on students experiencing mental health concerns. Their insight will play a critical role in informing this team and in helping them ensure compliance with applicable laws, such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And lastly on the screen is capacity assessment. The planning team needs to know what resources will be at its disposal. This assessment is used to identify people in the building with applicable skills, such as first aid certification, search and rescue training, counseling and mental health expertise, ability to assist individuals with disabilities and others with access and functional needs. And equipment and supplies should also be inventoried. So the inventory should include an evaluation of equipment and supplies uniquely for individuals with disabilities, such as evacuation chairs, the availability of sign language interpreters and technology used for effective communication, accessible transportation, and consumable medical supplies and durable medical equipment that may be necessary during a shelter-in-place or evacuation. School nurses can inform the capacity needs of the school based on their lessons learned and help identify the resources and supplies that are critical to efforts to protect students before, during, and after potential emergencies. The planning team decides which of the hazards and threats identified in Step 2 will be addressed in the EOP. The planning team may decide to address only those threats and hazards that rank high in risk priority, or it may decide to also address some of the threats and hazards that rank medium. And this is a critical decision point in the planning process that's left up to the planning team. It is recommended that the team address more than just the high risk priority threats and hazards. And then in Step 3, the planning team develops goals and objectives for each threat or hazard. The goal of Step 4 is to assign action for accomplishing planning objectives. Courses of action address the who, what, when, where, and how for the response to each hazard, threat, and function. They include criteria for determining how and when each response will be implemented under a variety of circumstances. The planning team develops courses of action and subsequently related response protocols and procedures to support the Step 3 efforts, goals, and objectives. To more clearly define an appropriate course of action, specific questions must be addressed. Answering primary questions such as who, what, when, where, and how for each hazard, threat, and function brings specificity to the process and helps develop courses of action that will help achieve the goals and objectives. This depth of planning will assist the team in writing the response procedures and protocol. And the goals and objectives and courses of action form those annexes. The courses of action will get very detailed and school building specific. For example, you can hold training sessions on basic first aid and health emergency, prepare capacity assessment to identify which staff may have additional training and skills, be sure emergency contacts and medical history forms are up to date and renewed annually, hold annual in-school health screenings such as vision and hearing, and reach out to teachers regarding student health concerns such as promoting the flu shot, proper hygiene, and hydration. In step 5, the planning team develops a draft of the school EOP using the courses of action developed in step 4. In addition, the team reviews the plan, obtains official approval, and shares the plan with community partners, first responders, local emergency management officials, health, public health, and mental health partners, staff, and stakeholders. As part of the review process, health professionals that have a set of roles and responsibilities in the plan, those on the core planning team and those on the ad hoc team, as well as school administrators, should be involved in approving and modifying the plan. Remember that planners have to be careful not to share every part of the plan. The planning team needs to determine what should and should not be shared and with whom it should or should not be shared based on their roles and responsibilities carrying out the plan. During the process of creating, updating, and implementing school EOPs, school nurses can work to ensure that schools abide by HIPAA guidance to protect student and staff privacy by only disclosing information to necessary parties. That should be listed on emergency forms. And now that the plan is written, it has to be implemented, which means practiced, reviewed, and enhanced. In other words, the whole school community needs training and opportunities for practice, and the courses of action have to be tested. In step 6, the planning team trains stakeholders to exercise the plan. Everyone in the plan needs to know his or her roles and responsibilities before, during, and after an emergency. The planning team must create a training and exercise schedule, deciding on frequency, type of exercise, and design. And before making any decisions, schools should consider the resources of the school district, and community partners with shared responsibilities, costs and benefits of each type of exercise, as well as its role in the planning process, any state or local requirements, the age of the student population, if students will be involved, parent involvement and possible roles, if parents will be included, and cultural diversity of the population and particular needs. School nurses should play a key role in exercises and efforts to practice the plan and to refine it, including the development of an after-action report. Also, as Elizabeth shared during her presentation, school staff may need to include additional training and practice in particular areas, which can be provided by the school nurse. And now that we have completed a walkthrough of how school nurses can support each step in the 6-step planning process, we're going to turn things back to Elizabeth now to help reinforce the role of school nurses discussed throughout and their role in each of the 5 preparedness mission areas. Elizabeth?
Thank you. So in review, school nurses are leaders and essential team members to plan, implement, and evaluate an emergency operation plan for a school and/or school district. School nurses assist in the prevention of school threats through assessment and referrals involving school administrators, school resource officers, and school mental health team as indicated. They protect students from identification and removal of hazards in the school environment, and school nurses actively mitigate the loss of lives and injury by evidence-based healthcare services. School nurses have the expertise, knowledge, and critical thinking skills to respond in emergency situations in the provision of leadership and healthcare services. School nurses are integral in the recovery process to establish a safe school environment and support the emotional and physical injuries. It is essential that the school nurse and nursing team participate in the planning process as a core team member. Janelle?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you so much, Allison and Madeline, for your participation. We do want to take some time now to answer some questions that have come in. Again, we do apologize for the audio issues at the start of today's webinar. We do want to remind everyone that there will be an archived version of this event on the REMCA Center website. You will also have access to the resource list that we're sharing as a part of that archived page as well. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions during this live event as well as before the event. We would like to take some time now to address some of those. I'm going to turn our first question to you, Elizabeth. The question is, how would a school-based health center and a school nurse work together during an emergency? Elizabeth?
Okay, I think that is a great question. Thank you for asking that. The roles of school-based health centers and school nurses are complementary, and if your school is fortunate enough to have a school-based health center and a full-time school nurse, you guys are rocking it. So in an emergency, there are some issues perhaps with just liability, and so the individual student enrolled in a school-based health center would have a potential for experiencing an emergency. And so you would need to consult with a provider in establishing a plan for these emergencies. And parent input, of course, is essential in this planning process to make sure that, parents are okay. Say, for example, if the child's having an asthma attack, can we, send the student out to the school-based health center provider to receive additional medication and a medical intervention to support them. In large-scale events, the plan for school-based health center staff involvement is a consideration. And again, I would, get some legal advice from the school district legal counsel and the school-based health center's legal team to be how they would be involved and agree with the plan. Certainly when any emergency occurs, you want the person with the highest level of expertise in that to be able to respond. But we do want to make sure that all those things have the check marks and the legal counsels for the school-based health center staff and the school district are in agreement on that.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that response. And I'll just add that going back to step one in the planning process, it's very important for that collaborative relationship to exist, and as Liz described, for that rapport to continue and to take place before, during, and after an emergency to just really strengthen those relationships. I do have another question related to what are some special requirements related to children with special needs and emergencies. I want to turn that to you again, Elizabeth, and then I can also help to answer this question. Elizabeth?
Sure. I did talk about that a little bit with some of the examples that I used, but it is very individualized based on what the needs are for that student with special health care needs, and so it is important when you're developing an emergency operation plan that you do think about all of those factors that could occur in the school setting, sheltering in place, evacuation, other things that we've talked about today, and that you have the support around that student so that they are taken care of during that time. We do know that there could be extended times in a large-scale event, like a tornado or a hurricane or an earthquake, and it may be that EMS isn't able to come immediately to your school set, so you may have to provide healthcare and basic needs for that student for several days. So I think it's really important that you involve your team, that you involve your special education teacher, the school nurse, any other school professionals that work with that child, the speech therapist, PT, OT, as well as the parent or guardian, to really think about and plan for those needs. Having some extra supplies is wonderful, the medical supplies as well as medications needed, and having those in a
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I'll just also add that going back to the guide for developing high-quality school EOPs that we discussed earlier, one of the planning principles outlined in that guide emphasizes that planning should provide for the access and functional needs of the whole school community. And that includes children and individuals with disabilities and other access and functional needs. And there also might be some requirements under the American Disabilities Act. So it's very important to just work in collaboration with your community partners to understand all of those requirements and to ensure that you're thinking about the whole school community as the EOP is developed in collaboration with school nurses and other partners. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I have one additional question that I'd like to turn to you. It's where can I get more emergency flip books outlining the steps to take in several emergencies? Mine were lost in a fire. Elizabeth?
That is a great question again. So many school teams do use sort of a flip book or resources with their emergency go bag or their supplies, just as reminders for the medical response team or lay folks that are on that team. I am not aware of, a resource where you can get free flip books. Typically what I've seen is once you develop your school or district emergency plan, then that is your guide, right? And so then there are quick, documents based on that guide that you created that can be laminated and put into a flip book format, so you can have those with you. I also know, many school nurses are first aid CPR instructors and have access to supplies through whichever agency that they're partnering with. And many of those, can be also laminated and put in a sort of flip book and attached to the emergency bag. So there's a reminder on how to do CPR and those sort of things. So that is what I would recommend.
Thank you so much, Liz. And we actually did have one additional question come in that I'd love to address. I know that you spoke about it briefly during your presentation, as did we. But the question is, are there any HIPAA considerations for school nurses? Liz?
Yes. So to clarify, HIPAA restricts healthcare providers in the community, those folks in hospitals, clinics, primary care providers, to release confidential health information without parent guardian consent for minors. So an example would be, if a school nurse contacted a pediatrician to ask if a child had a specific medical diagnosis or request immunization records, the parent would have to sign a release and get this information. Schools operate under FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, which requires parents or guardians written permission to release student education information, and all health information in schools is considered student education information. So within the school community, school staff requested to provide emergency health care to students have a need to know regarding diagnosis and response in emergency situations. And this is very individualized for each situation. So, for example, if a student with a severe allergy to food or type 1 diabetes, they may have members of the school community, such as your, classroom teacher, your school secretary, that will have the need to know to respond in an emergency in order to keep that child safe in the school environment.
Thank you so much, Liz. Very helpful information. I also want to just share that for additional information on the topic of HIPAA, we do encourage you to go to rems.ed.gov and to type HIPAA into the search engine, and you will be able to access additional information on this topic via the REMCA Center website. Thank you again, Liz, Elizabeth.
This is Madeline.
Please.
So sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add to that. Thank you, Janelle, for referencing HIPAA, and Elizabeth gave a very thorough answer. And to support folks with the FERPA requirements, the Department of Education administers the Privacy Technical Assistance Center. And that center has all sorts of resources, and they have responsive technical assistance where folks can reach out, give them a call, send them an email, and answer their very specific questions regarding FERPA.
Thank you so much, Madeline. And thank you again to everyone for submitting questions. We know that there were a few that we were not able to answer, and please note that we do have a resources slide that we'll share in just a moment that will direct you to additional resources that can support you and getting answers to these questions. And we do encourage everyone to download the resource list that's available via the Files Pod. Again, this resource list will also be available on the archive page of our website. Allison, over to you.
Thanks, Janelle. We did want to connect you all with some information and resources to support your everyday efforts. The REMS TA Center does research, write, and release fact sheets that may be found on our publications page. Two fact sheets to note for the role of school nurses are ordering masks and ordering masks and personal protective equipment, PPE, for schools, as well as preparing for opioid-related emergencies for K-12 schools and institutions of higher education. In addition, the REMS TA Center has written and released other publications that relate to topics where school nurses play an important role, and those are found on our website. For example, we have a TA snapshot on 10 tips for teaching the psychological first aid model for K-12 education agencies, as well as a helpful hints publication on psychological first aid for students and teachers, listen, protect, connect, model, and teach. Other types of resources that we have on our website include topic-specific resources pages, for example, supporting efforts to create a public health, medical, and mental health annex as a part of your emergency operations plan, and enhancing collaboration with key community partners supporting emergency planning. We have archived webinars on our site, for example, opioid drug-related emergencies and substance abuse prevention before, during, and after the COVID-19 pandemic, and developing high-quality school emergency operations plans, a collaborative process. We also have virtual trainings by request and live trainings by request that are available on topics like developing emergency operations plans, K-12 101. And we have much, much more on our site on a variety of emergency management planning topics, as well as those featured within our resource list. Turn things over to Janelle.
Thank you so much, Allison. And as I mentioned, I see that a few questions are coming in now. The great thing is that these questions can be answered via the additional resources that you see here on the screen, including collaborative planning. We have information sharing resources from the REMS TA Center, and dive a little deeper into step 1 of the 6-step planning process. We also are offering some resources via our resource list on the role of school nurses, including that position statement that Elizabeth shared earlier during her presentation, as well as the school nurse website toolkit. We also offer some resources from the REMS TA Center on the topic of evacuation, including considering those students with particular access and functional needs, and in thinking about developing those flip cards that can be inserted into those Go kits to support emergency response. We also have included some resources within that resource list on triage from the REMS TA Center as well as NASN, also thinking about the role of students and youth in community emergency response and thinking about that triage role. We also have resources, of course, on EOP development and how you can use the 6-step planning process and scenario-based planning to support EOP development. We have an entire webpage focused on that. So again, please make sure you download that resource list that's available via the Files Pod, and please check back in with us in a week. We'll send you that archived link so that you may access this webinar and share it with your colleagues. Please remember that REMS TA Center staff are available via email or phone to respond to your requests for technical assistance on a variety of topics. We're so grateful that we were able to provide support to you today and that you were able to tune in to hear from us and Elizabeth Clark with the National Association of School Nurses. Thank you again to Madeline Sullivan from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools, Elizabeth from the National Association of School Nurses, as well as to all of our participants. We really appreciate all of the work that you do to support school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness. Thank you for joining today's webinar.